Okay, everyone. After the AGM, we are now commencing the City of Vincent's Council briefing for the 9th of Council Toppelberg for the 9th of February 2021. So I'd like to declare the meeting open at 8:56 p.m. and start by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional owners of the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Apologies this evening. We do have apologies from Councillor Fotakis due to personal reasons, and we do have Councillor Castle on leave. She has requested a leave of absence, but we won't be able to deal with that until the council meeting next Tuesday. So we will go to public question time and receiving of public statements. Lydia, you have been waiting a long time. Did you wish to make a statement this evening, or are you just observing? Okay, well, thank you for your patience. It's much appreciated. Did we receive any questions in writing? No? Okay. That's the shortest public question time we've had in a very, very long time. So we'll move to declarations of interest.
Through you, Mayor Cole, received one declaration of interest from Councillor Loden. It's an interest affecting impartiality in relation to item 8.3, noting that one of Tool and Things Library Inc.'s organising committee members is a family member, and other members of the committee supported Councillor Loden's local government election campaign.
Thank you, CEO. I did have a question in relation.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, there is another one from me which I hadn't submitted, which was item 6.1, which is the parking restrictions. I have a proximity interest and won't participate in the debate or be in the chamber.
Thank you. You've got that, CEO? Are you going to write it on a piece of paper? Okay. I did have a question, CEO, in relation to item 7.8 for the events funding item. I note that Soundscapes of Beatty Park, I wasn't quite sure who the applicant was, but I noticed that the band does have a former council member in the band, but I wasn't sure whether it was the former council member was associated with the application. That wasn't clear from the report.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I can confirm that in time for the ordinary council meeting next week, when council will need to vote on the matter. But I can confirm that former councillor Jimmy Murphy is involved in the application and the event organising.
There might be a few impartiality interests in that case then. Okay. So we will go straight to the items, and I think because Lydia has waited so long, we'll go straight to that item, which is, it is the first item. Perfect. Item 5.1, 201 to 203 Oxford Street, Leederville, change of use from shop with ancillary roof terrace to shop and club premises. Are there any questions? Come on, Lydia's waited all this time.
I did. So
yes.
I just do have one, just to be clear, and I know I understand there's been a negotiated outcome, but just whether the occupancy is in line, proposed occupancy and the noise mitigation conditions are in line with the application and the applicant's intent, or are they conditions that are proposed to be imposed?
Through you, Mayor Cole, if you can hear me.
Yes, Mr. Naidoo, we can hear you.
Great, that's fantastic. Just wanted to confirm, I missed the part of that question, Councillor Toppelberg, but is it in regards to the occupancy permitted, whether that was proposed by the applicant or whether that's been imposed by administration? Is that the question?
Correct, and also the noise mitigation measures. So those two conditions, whether they are in line with the application or whether they are a negotiated outcome or whether they are being imposed by the city.
Sure, through you, Mayor Cole. In regards to the maximum occupancy, that was proposed by the applicant. It's also included in that venue management plan. That's included as an attachment to the agenda item. And in regards to the noise mitigation measures, the applicant actually engaged an acoustic consultant, and they were the recommendations of that acoustic report. Again, that acoustic report and those recommendations are included as an attachment to that agenda item.
Thank you.
Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. If I could just ask, and my apologies if I've missed it, just in relation to the process in the management plan or otherwise in terms of the management of any noise-related issues. I note from the management plan and the code of conduct for members that there is strong reactive measures in terms of revocation of membership. It's a potential revocation of membership should a member be identified and shown on CCTV footage, etc., as being breaching the amplified music or the noise restrictions on the property. But my understanding is, given that there's not going to be a dedicated staff member on site, how, if there is a noise issue, is what mechanism that surrounding residents have to have that addressed at the time, in terms of, I note that there was a statement around a security guard that could be contacted, but I just don't have it to the front of mind in terms of how that process is intended to work. And if I could get some clarification from the manager, that would be very useful for me.
Sure, through you, Mayor Cole. You're right, the venue management plan and the code of conduct do include responses to address patrons' behaviour and antisocial behaviour, should that arise. But in regards to a more responsive mechanism, there is a venue manager who is also the owner of the property, who will be available during the times of the premises being open. If not them, somebody else will be available. And there's also an added measure of a security guard who lives locally. Should any particular member need to be removed from the premises, that's also embedded in terms of the venue management plan and operational details. So I guess that's the more responsive approach, should there be an issue identified through the CCTV footage. There is also an intention, and that's captured in the venue management plan, to basically advise surrounding landowners of the contact details of that venue manager. And that basically ensures that there is a direct line of contact to the responsible or accountable operator of that premises. So yes, you're right, there is nobody physically there, but there are adequate safeguards to ensure that should any issues arise, there will be a response, and that would be timely.
Thank you. And just for my information and I guess interest in other matters that maybe we've considered previously, how does things like smoking restrictions work in a club premises? And how does that work in terms of, like, what is the premises in terms of considered to be like a private home where smoking would be allowed indoors, or is it considered to be like a another type of venue where people may be smoking inside? Is there any limitations on that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I understand it's the latter. I will confirm in the briefing notes to you, but ultimately this is a rooftop terrace. There is a portion that is covered, but there is also a portion that is open. Now, given that it is a private premises, I don't believe there would be any restrictions on smoking on a portion of that rooftop terrace. There is no suggestion in the applicant's proposal of a dedicated smokers area, so perhaps we can provide further information in the briefing notes.
Thank you, that would be useful.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Toppelberg.
Sorry, I just noticed the condition 2.3, and for that matter, condition 2.2, So no live performances permitted from the premises. Does that mean, for example, if a school band or a young group wanted to practice during the day or was invited by the club or the club members during daylight hours, in the absence of any timing restrictions, does that mean that those decibel levels and the restriction on any live music is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? And if that is the case, I'll foreshadow an amendment to perhaps allow for some of those things where it is practical because it may well, as a venue, lend itself to some of those things, certainly during daylight hours.
Through you, Mayor Cole, condition 2.3, which would serve to prohibit live music or performances, that was imposed by administration stemming from the acoustic report recommendation. So the acoustic report specifically specifies that amplified music can be contemplated, but it can only be to a certain decibel. So that's covered off in 2.2. However, it doesn't contemplate any live music or performances, which can be quite intrusive in terms of the noise creation. So on that basis, given that it hasn't been demonstrated through the acoustic report, 2.3 was recommended by administration for absolute clarity, particularly in relation to potential noise impacts.
Can I just ask a question? Would it be a valid condition if it was to say something along the lines of live performances are not permitted after X o'clock, and any live music performance would need to comply with the noise regs and whatever the state noise like outside of those hours would need to comply with the noise regs. So at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday, if a band is playing live music from there that is inside what's allowable under the noise regs, that would be permissible?
Through you, Mayor Cole, potentially, we can explore that further, understand what you're suggesting. In terms of the time that occurs during the day, that is relevant because there are different noise emissions permissible for different portions of the day or night. So that is appreciated. Perhaps we could better understand that if there was to be a live music or performance, it would still need to comply with the relevant noise limitation. So if it achieved that outcome, perhaps we could build in some greater flexibility with that condition. So that's a fair suggestion, and perhaps administration can liaise with the applicant following briefing.
Can I ask that you please do that, so that it just means that down the track I don't have to come back for another DA just to revise that condition if council was to be of a mind to approve it, but to look at what administration and the applicant would consider a reasonable time to impose that condition thereafter. So whether it be 8, 9, 10 p.m, whatever that may be, with no live music, but at other times to have an appropriately worded condition that would allow it should the applicant wish to pursue that at any time.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, we can consider and provide some advice to you.
Anything further, Councillor Toppelberg? Anything further, councillors? I do, CEO, I will just probably put in impartiality interest on this one also, just because the business owner is a residential neighbour, and we have not spoken about this application. Thank you. So we will move on. Thank you for coming. You're welcome to stay if you haven't had enough yet. We can keep going for hours here. See you later. Okay, item 5.2, number 526 Fitzgerald Street, North Perth, change of use from single house to consulting rooms, amendment to approved. Are there any questions? Councillor Toppelberg has not left the chamber. Are there any questions? I think I interpreted this from the plans, but I just wanted to ask and be absolutely clear that we're looking at, are we looking at 2 offices and 2 consulting rooms, or 3 offices and 2 consulting rooms?
Through you, Mayor Cole, The proposed plans are included as attachment 3, and as part of attachment 3, there's really only 2 consulting rooms. There are no offices being sought as part of this proposal. There will be a supporting administration function on site, but the proposal is to increase the number of consulting rooms from 1 previously approved to 2. Perhaps the uncertainty arises because the previously determined plans, which have been included as attachment 2, also included the approval of office tenancies, but they are no longer seeking that as part of this proposal. They're just seeking 2 consulting rooms to operate from the premises.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Okay, moving on to 5.3, number 50 Barley Street, Mount Lawley, proposed single house, section 31 reconsideration, coming back from the State Administrative Tribunal. Any questions on this item? No questions? Okay. That takes us to, just to note that 5.4, which was Amendment 4 to Local Planning Policy on Character Retention and Heritage Areas and Guidelines for the Boulevard, Kalgoorlie Street, Matlock Street and Buxton Street, has been withdrawn by administration. There was an issue here whereby emails were sent to submitters but not letters. That was, I think, happening during the CEO is going to discuss why.
Through Mayor Cole, yes, just to confirm, we had emailed and had email contact details for the submitters, but we didn't have email addresses for the original signatories to the nomination forms, and we're seeking to defer. We've withdrawn the item by 1 month to allow us to write letters to all the original signatories and the residents in the nominated streets.
Before we pass on though, there was some things that I had noted down that I thought would be helpful to have in the report, which might, be useful for the preparation of the report next month. So for example, can we have the time frame between the nominations received for each street and the date on which the nominations were received for each street? And could we also have information on the attendees at the workshop? That was the first workshop that was held at Mount Hawthorn Lesser Hall, because I do believe we took attendance lists there. So it'd be useful to know who attended from which street and the number on as well as part of the reporting. And I have been contacted by quite a number of residents on Kalgoorlie Street. I don't know if other councillors have been the same, but Kalgoorlie Street in particular has been the street that I've been contacted on. I did consider whether it might be useful to see whether we could hold a specific meeting with those residents of Kalgoorlie Street at Anzac Cottage, which is right in the middle of where they live, just to go through what it actually means. I know that people have raised with me issues around heritage areas, etc., and there has been some concern that, I think it sort of goes into what you can and can't do, whether you can demolish, whether you're going to be heritage listed. I just think it might be useful just to engage with those residents, just to explain this is really more about scale and setbacks, and not about those sorts of specifics that you can still build, you can still demolish, etc. So that was just to let you know that we could also organise that before this item comes back to council in March. Was there any other information that any councillors were seeking in the report? No? Okay. All right. So we'll move on then to item 5.5, amendment number 6 to local planning scheme number 2 and amendment number 1 to local planning policy number 7.4.5, temporary accommodation. The questions on this item? Councillor Gontszewski.
No questions. I'll just foreshadow amendments that I'll prepare over the week in relation to a number of the provisions that have changed since the version went out for advertising.
Would that be things like the 2-night minimum and there was removal of sufficient distance from outdoor living area? The other thing I just think we need to consider is where the state government is at with this process. Has that been considered, Mr. Naidu?
Through you, Mayor Cole. That's
John?
someone's for me.
Welcome back to your first council meeting.
Thank you. Yes, that's been considered, and we can provide an update on exactly where the state government is with their process. But at this stage, there's nothing in the pipeline in the short term that they're proposing. And this policy amendment and scheme amendment align with the position paper that was released last year.
Has there been any discussion with the Department of Planning about where that's at and when a document may become available?
I'll have to take that on notice to see if there's been any discussions in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
But I know the scheme amendment itself was discussed with the department, and they were supportive and said it aligned with their proposals. So. Okay.
So that'd be great if we could have some information about that in the briefing notes. Thank you very much. The other thing that I would just like to query is that the table, I think it's good to convert the long descriptors into the table for ease of reading in terms of what, what a holiday house is and holiday accommodation. But I did note in that changeover, there was no mention of no more than a single 3 months rent or, sublet or booking is probably the word, in a 12-month period. That was part of the original that was advertised, that for those residential areas where you have a holiday house or holiday accommodation booking, that it could be only a single booking and that it could also only be a maximum of 3 months of the 12 months.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. That was removed because it is already a requirement under the definition of those land uses. But I will clarify that and set all of that out in the briefing notes.
So you're saying that because it's a requirement of the land use, I still think it would, for people reading the document, it's always safe to assume that they may not read lots of different documents. So if it's still the case, it would be good to see it housed in the table. For ease of reference.
Yeah, we can review that and during the week and provide that in the briefing notes and update the report.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. That's all for strategy and development, unless you get any random questions during the information bulletin item. Infrastructure and environment, item 6.1, proposed parking restriction, Broome and Wright Streets, Highgate. Are there any questions? Councillor Hallett.
Happy for any of these to be just on notice. There was a few comments in there from the community consultation about parking around the Woolworths, and just wondering if admin's considered, preemptive changes that might be required for that. More of a process question going forward. And then just while I'm speaking, the second one, just wondering if you can comment on the public health implication that you've mentioned, reduced exposure to environmental health risks, and wondering why that one was chosen.
Yeah, through you, McCall, I'll take both those questions on notice.
Any other questions on this item, councillors? Okay, we can invite Councillor Toppelberg back in because we're moving on to item 6.2, which is the draft waste development of water and environment regulation requirement. Are there any questions on item 6.2? Sorry, Councillor Hallett, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Again, maybe these can be on notice, and it might be quicker if I just go through all of them. Firstly, just curious as to when the CEO of the department communicated to the city about the requirement and the submission date. I know that we already had one ready to go, and I'm assuming that maybe local councils that didn't have an existing council endorsed plan ready to go might have some other issues. But just wondering about that timeline. In the template form that's attached to the report that the city's completed, there was a few sections where there seemed to be some missing numbers and error codes. For example, in section 6, recovery rates of local government waste, and table 11, compositional audit on recycling bins. Just wondering if I can find out more about whether that's related to Project 7 in terms of our data collection and reporting improvements that need to be progressed, or maybe there was just an error in the Excel document. That's all for that one, actually.
Councillors, any other questions on the waste strategy? Okay. 6.3 e-permit implementation update. Councillor Hallett.
Feel free to jump in, anyone else. The report referred to non-residents who required assistance at the library as they didn't have internet access. Just wondering if any of those had an additional permit for visitors, and if so, how are they advised to manage the system without internet access at home?
Yes, we might call. I'll need to check that, so I'll take that question on notice.
Was there a reason behind not including the qualitative comments from the survey in the report? And is it possible at a minimum to have that added to the briefing notes?
Yeah, through my call, I can look into that and add them to the briefing notes.
In last year's motion requesting the consultation, there was a request that the CEO ensures that varied requirements are made available for residents in approved circumstances. Are you able to outline what these varied arrangements are and how many have been needed?
Yeah, through my call, I believe that is listed in the report on page 374, where we talk about people who approached us unable to use the system in the first instance, and how we assisted them to create accounts. Sometimes we help them to create the accounts, sometimes we help relatives. Those are the two main methods that we've used.
So no one requested or was provided an alternative to using the system as it stands?
Through my call, no, has been used, as we've not needed to do anything other than use the system.
Just also looking at the survey questions, just wondering how it was developed and whether there's any specialist expertise in survey design within admin that staff access. Just thinking for question 7, in which 28% of respondents said they didn't think the system would make it easier for them to manage. Was it considered if there'd be a follow-up question for these respondents to specify why?
Yes, we have a call. I'll take that question on notice.
Councillors, I have some questions in relation to the 16 people saying that they wanted an app as opposed to a web-based solution. I was just wondering if we were to move to an app, what that might involve and what the cost would be. Happy for you to take that on notice.
Yeah, through my call, I'll take that on notice. I believe we discussed it with the supplier, but I haven't got that information to hand, so I'll take that on notice if that's okay.
Yep, sure, thank you. The other thing is I note that when we talk about their savings, it's I think it's like 6,800 per annum. I'm thinking it would also be useful to talk about the efficiency and the coverage of Vincent Ranges, because it's not just about money savings but also operational efficiencies. Is that information that could be added to the report for Tuesday?
Yes, Michael, absolutely. That saving is purely on printing costs, and what we've not done in this report is included, you're right, those opportunity savings, the efficiency of ranges and the speed in which they can patrol. So I'll get some information on that to the report before next week.
I think it would be good to perhaps consider what coverage rangers currently have in terms of their ability to patrol streets, like there's a motion to the AGM tonight on this very issue, and how that would improve under the new system. I also wanted to ask a question that residents were advised that paper permits would run until the end of January 21. We've gone beyond that, and the report talks about a 60% sign-up rate. What is administration's solution for the interim while we continue to assist or ask people to sign up to the new system?
Yes, through you, Nicole. So the first thing to say is we're not enforcing at the moment. So I think we said in the previous report that we take a very relaxed approach to enforcement. We want people to sign up. You know, we don't want to infringe them for anything. What I can tell you is the numbers up now to 68%. We've had another 126 people sign up since the report was drafted.
That's great. What was that figure?
Another 126. So it takes us up to about 68% by my quick math, which is good. So there's a steady flow of people. Now, the other thing we've done, there's about 1,300 that haven't signed up. We've sent yesterday 780 emails. We had the email addresses for those people just to follow up why they hadn't signed up, etc. Straight away, we've had 73 who say they don't live in Vincent anymore, so the information's out of date. So we are going through a data cleansing process of the ones that are left. So we send out the email, and some we just have telephone numbers. So again, we're phoning those people on an individual basis to just find out what the issue is. So yeah, I'm confident by doing that, we'll get close to, we'll never get 100%, I think, but we'll get close to that over the next maybe month.
And if we don't get close to 100%, and it comes down to things like IT barriers, language, English as a second language, or disability, or these access and inclusion issues that we've been trying to bed down, what will this administration's response be, and what do we need to actually have criteria to say that if you do meet this criteria, we will do X, Y, or Z? I think it's just getting back to the resolution of the 17th of November and talking about varied requirements for residents in approved circumstances. We still don't have a sort of criteria to determine what an approved circumstance would be and what those varied requirements would be. It seems to be so far that we've managed to get to 68%, but I could foreshadow that we would see a percentage that may not be signing up because of these issues that are yet to be, bedded down. So I guess I'm still going back to that 17th of November resolution and querying what would the approved circumstances be for someone to access varied requirements, and what would those varied requirements be?
Yeah, good question, Michael. So what we're focusing on now is getting that number down. So we're not proposing to write, criteria at this point. I think we would like to get close to 100% and then see what the real barriers are. Because there are people come to us who, one of the barriers, they say they haven't got internet access, but we've managed to resolve that. So we are managing to resolve it without, too much difficulty. So as I said, the telephone calls and the emails to the people who are still remaining is already bringing the number down quite significantly. So we're confident we'll get close to a number, and then we'll look at what is left, what the issues and the reasons are, and adapt accordingly.
Has the city spoken to any other local governments that have implemented e-permits and sort of discussed with them access and inclusion processes and how they've gone about helping people that might have a barrier?
Yes, Michael, we have. So I know that the team have spoken to some of the local governments that have implemented the permit system, and to my knowledge, none of them, they've all managed to, they've resolved all the issues, just similar to the way that we have.
Okay. And could we please get an update for next Tuesday on what the percentage is, and, just a sort of continuation of the update that's provided in the report, so that given that there's that email going out, it would be good to know what the latest response rate and any issues raised are from residents.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. We'll update it. As I said, I've already got it verbally, so we'll update it at the last possible point when we redraft the report for council next week.
Thank you very much, Director. Are there any other questions? Councillor Gontaszewski.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cole. Through you to the Executive Director, just wondering if I can request some additional detail on the security assessment that was undertaken and the assessment against the Australian privacy principles. If that could come through in the briefing notes, that would be awesome.
Through you, Michael. Yes, I can do that.
Anything further, councillors? Okay. Okay, moving to Community and Business Services item 7.1 investment report as at 30th of November 2020. And we have both this report and also the December investment report later, but we do need to consider them individually. So does anyone have any questions in relation to item 7.1?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question on the fossil fuel-free investments. It's, well, also pertains to the third 7.3 as well, but percentages there have dropped progressively over recent periods of time, given there's so much pressure on banks at the moment to address fossil fuel lending. I was wondering if we need to provide a bit more scrutiny over our opportunities here. There's 11 banks in Australia that lend to fossil fuel organisations and 61 that don't. So it seems like there might be an opportunity there.
Through Mayor Cole, I just might need to clarify that we, administration will be updating the report because we'd previously classified Macquarie Bank and Macquarie Bank is exposed to fossil fuel investments. So our exposure is incorrect in this current report and will be updated for the OCM next week.
Councillor Hallett.
I guess just to follow up to that, in terms of the number of banks that are assessed through market forces and by administration in terms of doing a comparison of rates, is it possible to find, I guess, get some more detail about how that comparison is done and to what extent it includes the whole list of banks versus just some selected ones, just in the briefing notes?
Through Michael, yes, we can provide that detail in the briefing notes. We'll add some extra detail, including on the advice of the potential cost of increasing our level of investment in non-fossil fuel portfolios.
Can I ask, I was trying to recollect and I haven't had time to go back through all of the reports. What's the highest level that we have achieved percentage-wise in divestment? Because it has really, this is like an all-time low. I thought we'd achieved well over 50% at one point. Can anyone remember? Or can I have that question taken on notice? At what was the highest level, percentage level of divestment we have achieved? And my other question is, can we do a much broader sweep of financial institutions to invest with? I noticed there wasn't any in the -1 category that we're investing in, which does provide a significant percentage and significant scope.
Through Michael, yes, we can check what the historical trend has been and include that in the report for next week. Perhaps we could actually have a graph in our reports that shows since we've, because I think it has literally gone, so, and you know that is an item that we ask, well, particularly our councillors here ask every time. We're very interested. Yeah. Any other questions on this item? Okay, so we'll go to item 7.2, financial statements as at the 30th of November 2020. Any questions on this item? Okay, item 7.3, investment report as at the 31st of December 2020. Any questions on this item? This is when it gets down to 5%.
I did have another question on this other than the divestment. I was interested that the municipal interest is considerably up compared to budget. So the year-to-date budget was 9,675, which was also the same for November. So I'm not sure whether that's a typo. But the actual is 38,000. And I'm just wondering, is that because we're holding, I mean, I sort of looked at our expenditure programs and it looked like we weren't too far off. So I'm not really sure why that's so. We just have a bit of information about that. Anyone? Is anyone out there? Okay. Director? I'm not sure if you caught that question.
Yeah. Mayor Cole, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's Virginia.
Hello.
Yeah, look, I just did catch the end of that question, and I'll make sure that we cover that off in the briefing notes for you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions on this investment report? No, okay. Next is item 7.4, financial statements as at 31st of December 2020. Any questions? Just on this report, I thought that we could potentially highlight the issue of the HBF depreciation. I know that's referred to in the report and it sort of says that that's one of the factors, but perhaps it needs to be, because this is some information that's sort of come recently to our attention, that this could potentially be explored a bit further in this report, and also potentially what the city is aiming to do to tackle that issue.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Cole. I'll make sure that we add a bit more explanatory information on that. And I think in terms of the strategy itself, we've got a separate piece of work looking into that, and we'll discuss that during the budget development process.
Okay, thank you. Also noting the DFES storm damage claim, that's very positive. And just in relation to revenue by program, now tracking at about 20% above budget, is this something that we're going to seek to correct through mid-year budget review, noting it's got to go on to from 15% to 20% in that month?
Yeah, that's right, Mayor Cole. We currently are seeing that our revenues are doing better compared to the budget, and we'll be using the mid-year review as an opportunity to address that.
I think that'll be helpful, because I did notice that the revenue from the operating program does show significant variances up and down. So it's not that it's just sort of 20% above generally, but it does seem to be quite varied across the different categories.
Yeah, so Mayor Cole, we're noticing just as a general trend that we're sitting at about 80% of a normal revenue spend, say, for example, to a 2018-19 year. But we are constantly monitoring it because of the conditions that we're in, and we'll use these quarterly reviews to bring it more into line with the actuals. And we've taken a conservative approach, as you'll recall. So if we do have a surplus, we will be able to identify how we can use that to benefit the community's programs.
Okay, thank you. The next, any further questions? Right. The next item is 7.5, authorisation of expenditure for 1 to 30th of November 2020. Are there any questions? I did just want to follow up on the DevCo question. Oh, you had that for later. I think that there was an outstanding question in relation to expenditure on DevCo builders, but also just in terms of itemising in the report, I think it'd be useful to say whether the expenditure is under an awarded tender or whether it's another project. just because there's a lot of different values there, but it's not really attributed to whether it's attached to the tender that they've won or whether they've been contracted to do additional works.
Yeah, Mayor Cole, I'll take that one on notice and look into it. My understanding is that the finance system doesn't easily help them to report against those two parameters, but I'll certainly look at what I can provide to you. And yes, we do need to provide a more detailed report on that DevCo, so I'll follow that up as well.
Okay. And I just had a query about market force advertising, various departments, 18,000 or 18,800. I was just wondering what sort of advertising that is.
Yeah, Mayor Cole, I'll take that one on notice and give you a bit of a breakdown.
Thank you. And just in relation to the credit card use, there was a disputed refund listed 8 times. I'm not sure if that was a typo or whether we're, dealing with credit card fraud.
I can give you information on that. That was actually my credit card and it wasn't a typo. We had the same amount was taken out 8 times, but we have had that successfully paid back to us. And we suspected that there was a subscription that had become corrupted. And so we went through a process of not only cancelling the credit card and getting it reissued, but we went through and cancelled a number of subscriptions and then got the passwords and information on all those reset as well. So we haven't had that problem since that time.
Yes, I do think subscriptions are like the financial potential crisis of the future.
That's very true.
Thank you for that. Any other questions on expenditure? Okay, so we're moving on to 7.6, authorisation of expenditure for the period 1st of December to the 31st of December 2020. Any questions? Sorry, I can't help myself. I've just got one. It's in relation to P. Stedman, the donation for looking behind the masks. Was that for the masks at Britannia Reserve in the trees?
I'm not 100% sure. I'll look into that one for you.
Thank you. Oh, that was an art piece. There's masks in the trees at Britannia, but I didn't know that if it is that, I just didn't realise the city had any sponsorship arrangement with that. Possibly not, though.
I'll get the detail on that for you, Mayor Cole.
Thank you. And we're moving on then to item 7.7, Leederville Gardens Trust COVID-19 funding, rural community services. Any questions? No questions? Councillor Hallett has a question.
Sorry, slightly on tangent, just in relation to that. Are we going to get a nice summary of the, outcomes of those funding arrangements that we did?
Through you, Mayor Cole, can I confirm we're talking about the arts relief grants? Is that what we're touching on there?
Oh, it was more the benevolent.
Leederville Gardens.
Okay. I understand. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I can provide you with a summary of where those grants are at.
Okay. Any further questions? I'm just clarifying. Sorry to be pedantic, but is it 3 months from the date of the 29th of November or 3 months from the date of the council resolution?
I think it's 3 months from the, I think it was the first of those options, not the second.
Okay.
Is that
so that would really
sense?
only give them one more, well, we're in February, so it won't just be to the end of this month. Can we just check that's sufficient for them to expend that money?
Yeah, I'll confirm those dates for you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, the next item is 7.8, events funding, Subiaco Football Club, City of Vincent match, family and footy in Leederville, and soundscapes of Beatty Park. Questions? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Cole. Can I just please ask the Director, just for recommendation to waiving the seeking the Arts Advisory Group's advice. Can I just ask why that was?
It was really just that at the moment we have a special round of funding relating to the event sponsorship. And when the policy was written, it was designed for an annual process. And we're just finding at the moment that we're getting ad hoc requests coming through for event sponsorship that's falling out of sync with the Arts Advisory process. You might recall that at the last Arts Advisory meeting, I took the Arts Advisory Group through the process that we were going through and discussed that with them at length and sought their input as to how they would like to be involved. And where I can, I'm seeking to seek their input into these decisions. But I've also trying to juggle the payment and granting of these sponsorships to the events providers in a timely fashion so that they can actually progress with their logistics. So I think it's a disconnect between our special round of grant funding and then also the original intent of the policy. They're sort of not lining up at the moment.
Thank you. And just my second query, I think I've actually found the answer to it, but I'll just double check. Just on page 579, where the Subiaco Football Club have requested sponsorship for 7,500 plus in-kind support. It looks like that you've actually have spoken to them regarding the reduction to 7,000. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillors, questions? Could I just ask a question about, I have asked for potential impartiality reasons, as we're just going to find out who the applicant is for Soundscapes.
So Mayor Cole, I can confirm that the applicant was Mr. Paul Sloan, the manager and drummer of Sunshine Brothers Band. There's no mention in the application of any former councillors in the application.
Yep. And just to clarify, it's not that the person's a former councillor, it's more that they're a friend, because former councillors can go on and live lives and have fun.
Yeah, sure.
Not, not have to be in a chamber.
Yeah, so only Mr. Sloan is mentioned in the application.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And I also just wanted to clarify now that we've had notice, sadly, that St. Patrick's Day is not going ahead. It might just need an adjustment in the financials. Feel so bad for St. Patrick's Day 2 years in a row. It's just like the absolute worst timing for them. They are absolute troopers the way they take this in their stride.
I know it's devastating outcome, but I can certainly update those financials before the OCM so it reflects the most recent information we've got.
Thank you. And I also just wanted to check on the timing of these events. So in terms of COVID safe capacities, how far out they might sit. And I also just wanted to say, with the next funding round, will we be having more discussion with town teams and trying to encourage some town teams and some town centre activation?
Yeah, Mayor Cole, I'll take that one on notice and have a discussion with the team, the team that's involved with that. I think that's a very good suggestion. Sorry, what was the first question?
The first question was the timing of the two events that we're being asked to approve, just from the perspective of how far out they are, given that we have got some pretty strict requirements at the moment.
Sorry, Mayor Cole. I can confirm that the Soundscapes of B Park is intended for the 27th of March and the Subiaco Football Club event is for the 2nd of April. So what we're doing is monitoring as the situation as it's unfolding, and we're staying in close contact with those organisers and making sure that they have up-to-date COVID plans for their events.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Okay, thank you, Director.
Thanks, Nicole.
Moving to Chief Executive Officer items. So 8.1 is City of Vincent ordinary election of the 16th of October 2021, appointment of electoral commissioner to conduct the election by postal vote. Councillor Hallett.
Apologies if I missed it in the report, although it probably didn't need to be in the report. Through you, Mayor, to the CEO, just wondering if we'll still continue to have drop-in ballots at the administration as well as the postal vote.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, I think that's usually an option provided by the returning officer appointed by the AEC, but I can confirm that in the briefing notes next week.
Councillors, I have a question about priority post. I note that it's an additional $5,130 for priority post for lodgement of the electoral packages, but not for the, I understand that the Electoral Commission will just send these out by a normal post when the packages are being sent out. So I've got two questions around this. We have had some issues in the past with the date of issue. And is the Electoral Commission able to guarantee a time frame in which the ballots would be sent out? And secondly, I'm just wondering, could we get a time frame on normal mail versus priority post for the lodgement of the packages so that council can assess whether it's that $5,000 would be well spent? And I think, could you just clarify for me whether we have had priority post in the past, because I thought that we had, given that the electoral, the post timeframes changed considerably about 2-3 years ago.
Through Mayor Cole, I'll confirm in the briefing notes if we've previously used priority postage for the election ballots, and there obviously it's a lumpy mail out for Australia Post all at the same time to 130 odd local government areas. So there has been, we noticed some delays that ballots arrive in chunks as they move through the system, and obviously Australia Post has gone through some significant reforms around mail delivery in the last few years.
Thank you. And it was just about the timeframes for priority post lodgement versus standard post lodgement, what the days would look like. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, 8.2, quarterly update of 26 strategic projects outlined in the Corporate Business Plan 2020-21 to 2023-24. Councillor Loden and then Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor. I must admit my old man eyes did struggle to read this one a little bit. I won't worry about it for the meeting because I was able to get through it. The first one was just around FOGO, and I'm not entirely clear where this is at in the process, but I was wondering about the status of the tender that we're doing, recognising that if it is in the middle of it, that might be confidential.
Through you, Nicole, I can help with that. The procurement process is almost complete.
Do we know what the technology is that's going to be used to process the FOGO at this point in time?
Through you, Nicole, yes, we do. So I can provide some more information on that.
And how was carbon dioxide emissions considered in the selection process?
Through you, Nicole, I'll take that question on notice.
The other thing is that it is possible to generate a carbon credit from changing your waste approach. So I was wondering if the tenderer is considering generating ACCUs as a part of their process, and also is it proposed to have that clarified as to who would get the carbon credits generated from any waste methodology that's used?
Through you, Nicole, I'm going to take that one notice too.
My second question was around the various master plans we have. I think it's 11, 12, 14, 15, 18 and 20 out of those strategic projects. It appears like a number of them are basically delayed because of lack of funding. And I was wondering if we could get some details of the quantum of funding required for each of those projects, where that's been defined. Obviously, not all of them are at that level. And if there is what are the realistic funding opportunities for those projects as well? Even though it's probably optimistic to think that we can fund all of them ourselves.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we can provide the information on the costings that we have for those that have been through detailed design, and we can then also look at what possible opportunities we've earmarked for those projects.
Done? Yes, thank you. Any further questions, Councillor? Sorry, we're coming to you, Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. I appreciate, because my fabulously youthful lady eyes struggled as well with the table, but I'm going to request more information in it. I really appreciate the status update and the health status columns, but it would be useful just for that sort of update on a page to understand, on the basis of the approved project schedule, what the current milestone is that's, I guess, being worked on, and when the approved project plan says that milestone was, like, what month that milestone was meant to be completed in, just so we can get that a little bit more detail on how the project is tracking in accordance with the approved milestones, noting that there can be a little bit of variance but still have a green status.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we can include in that attachment where it has the health status what month we are expecting the next milestone, and therefore it will reflect the green, yellow and reds.
Thank you.
Is that all, Councillor Gonchevsky? Any other questions?
Through Mayor Cole, just to confirm that the resolution is not good on this attachment, so we'll recirculate it as a separate attachment to elected members on docs on tap. So it'll have a higher resolution in a standalone PDF document.
That would be marvellous. Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just regarding the community engagement framework, do we have an idea of the month of when we're going to be presented with the plan?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the community engagement framework is earmarked to come to council at the next workshop, and then pending that feedback, we would be looking to go out for advertising following that.
Go ahead.
Just in relation to the wayfinding strategy, I believe the update talked about that the scope had been approved, and so then the tender was being prepared. And I'm not sure if that, so is the intention that the scope of the project would be decided and then the council would be engaged on the objectives of the project, or would that happen earlier than the actual setting the parameters of what we're contracting an external consultant to deliver? I mean, how will we ensure that what we engage an external consultant to deliver is in alignment with the council's objectives for the project?
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's correct. So at the moment we are drafting the scope for the external consultant. We can definitely provide details of that via email to ensure that aligns with what we want the project to achieve. The idea is that it would be a reverse brief and the consultant would come back with how they are going to deliver the project. And at that point, we would also be able to discuss what consultants can achieve and how that aligns with what's been discussed in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? I think that Councillor Gonchevsky might have raised this previously, but there's a lot of discussion about the sport and recreation facilities plan. Is it possible for council to be provided with a project plan, including the scope and the budget allocation to that project?
Through you, Mayor Cole, absolutely.
Thank you. And also just in relation to the Leadable Activity Centre plan, it did talk about the consultant resignation causing a 2-month delay. And I just wondered that whether we need to consider for future procurement of consultancy contracts a continuity requirement.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think that's a great idea to be looked at and looking at the contingencies to ensure that these delays don't occur again.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to 8.3, which is the council recess period 2020 to 21 receiving of items dealt with under delegated authority between the 16th of December and the 2nd of February 2021. Are there any questions? No questions, okay. So then we move to the information bulletin, which is item 8.4. Are there any questions on the information bulletin? Councillor Gontaszewski.
Just that I noticed that the part of the resolution in relation to the authorisation of expenditure from October 2021 related to the request for information on DevCo, but that doesn't appear to have been included in the register of reports to be actioned, and that which may have contributed to why the delay in providing that report. We also didn't put an end date on the resolution, which is a lesson for me, but just if the register of reports to be actioned and progress report could be updated with that item, because I couldn't see it in there.
Through Merkel, yes, we'll update that report.
And just to, through Mayor Cole, just to reassure the Deputy Mayor, that information is still being collated, so it's not been forgotten, but it's proving more difficult than we originally thought. But that information is being collated.
Thank you. I may speak on that next week.
Thank you. Any other questions? I did have a bit of a look at the notices of motion, and I noticed the graffiti removal. It does say that it was due to come to the February 2021 meeting. So I just thought that should be updated, and would like to request a idea of when that will come back to council.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I know that it's being prepared to come to the February workshop. So there might be an interpretation issue there, but it's definitely not a council meeting, but to a workshop initially.
Okay, thank you. And just when I was reflecting about notices of motion, I still don't feel that the notice of motion that I put up some years ago on demolition without DA has really been concluded, but it doesn't feature there anymore. So I might just look into that a bit more over the next week, because I probably need to just reacquaint myself with the wording, and I'm just not really sure that has really been concluded. But I'll pull it out and I'll just yeah. Okay, any other questions on the information bulletin? Okay, we do have an extra item, just when you thought it was all over, and that is item 8.5, appointment of complaints officer and adoption of complaint form, model code of conduct. Are there any questions on this item? Have you all been aware that it was added to the agenda? Yes, okay. Are there no questions? I just did want to ask, is there not a standard form?
Through you, Mayor Cole. Yes, there is a standard form that's prescribed by DLGSC, and that's the form that we're recommending in this report.
So it's as per the DLGR, is that right? Yeah,
that one.
But we haven't added anything or, okay. Right, thank you. Are there any other questions, Councillor Toppelberg?
Thank you. Since it was mentioned that the department had intent to proceed with a model code of conduct, so the question is to the CEO. The CEO has indicated that would be coming in, and I think the initial words that had been used would replace all existing, but council had made it clear that they intended for us to add to it. I mean, just can I get clarification? Is it your intent that at the date that the model code comes in, that would replace our existing code, and anything that elected members wish to have in addition to it would start from scratch? Or is it the intent that the two would exist at the city alongside each other from the date that the model code of conduct is required to be adopted?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the way the regs read, the model code of conduct are now in effect, taken to be in effect, as moved by the regs, and then it's up to the local council to embed and adopt that with any modifications, additions, changes, or nuance within 3 months of the regs being gazetted last week.
So that doesn't really answer the question as to what's your intent, I think, in terms of the existing provisions in the code of conduct that deal with matters that aren't addressed under the model code?
Through Mayor Cole, my intent was to discuss the existing versus the new standard with the council at the workshop in February.
And that's with the intent to have it presented to the March meeting, potentially go for advertising if council is of the view that it's something that should be advertised, and then be back in time to affirm within 3 months of last week?
Through Mayor Cole, I don't think there's a statutory requirement to publicly advertise a code of conduct for councillors. So that would be
if councillors have the will to do it, will we have enough time to do it to be able to meet the requirements of the regs and have, or will we end up with 2 concurrent documents?
If I can assist for you, Mayor Cole, there shouldn't be 2 concurrent documents. The adopted code per the regulation stays in place until council adopts the code of conduct. There isn't a requirement to advertise. I think you would be pushed to get local public notice out and incorporate any amendments that you want to make to the code of conduct. And there is a limit on the amount of amendments and how you can amend the code of conduct under the regulation. So it has to incorporate the model code, and only a few additions can be made in regards to behaviours, which is Division 3 of the model code only.
So elements such as attendance at meetings and workshops, and so I suppose availing elected members of the required information to be able to make decisions, that those are some of the things that have been particular to our code of conduct. It was brought up at the AGM earlier about contact and length of time with contact. I understand that we did separate at one point the administrative and the elected member code of conduct, but are those sorts of things able to be included under provision 3?
For you, Mayor Cole, I think my inclination would be no. There is a section that already deals with things like attendance at meetings in the model code.
So and I know we're not debating, but one of the issues that we raised when this was first brought to our attention 18 months ago was that the only requirement, and there have been elected members in this very chamber who have pointed to the Act and its requirement to attend meetings and what are designated as meetings. We've had elected members refusing to turn up to workshops or other things of that nature on the basis that it wasn't required under the code of conduct or under the Act, and there'd been exceptions to that.
Is this a question?
It sure is. So considering that's something that had been pointed out when it was first intimated that there would be a model code of conduct, can we please get some advice in the briefing notes as to how, whether through that code of conduct or as a separate requirement, which can be a voluntary code within Vincent, I'm happy for that, but something that would encapsulate those things that we have seen as part of our accountability and our expectations to ourselves and to community?
Yes, of course. For you, Mayor Cole, we can include that there is a requirement on council members to act in accordance with policy. So it might be that we need to put a concurrent policy forward that deals with those attendance requirements. Council could adopt that, and that would just sit alongside. I don't think we'd be able to include it as such in the model code, but as you suggested, as a separate document.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just to clarify that local governments may add to what's in the model standards, but those additions will be deemed to have no effect if they're inconsistent with the model standards. So I don't think there would be necessarily a problem with strengthening a provision, but certainly not one that counteracts the intent of the model standard.
Just so that I'm clear on the timing with our meetings, we effectively have to approve this at our March meeting because April will be too late, which means that if we're discussing at the February workshops, we'll literally get it, and the first time we see it, it has to be approved, or we'd have to have a special meeting in order to meet those statutory timeframes. Is that correct?
Through Mayor Cole, yes.
Finished. Okay. Any other questions on this item? All right. So that was the last item of business because we currently don't have any business under items 9 or 10 or 11. So thank you very much, everybody. And I'll declare the council briefing close at 9